Welcome back to another deep dive. You know, usually when we sit down at this table, we are looking outward. We are scanning the horizon.
Right.
We're talking about the collapse of an empire or a shift in the global tech market or maybe some geopolitical chess game that's, changing the map. We look at the macro.
That is our bread and butter. We like the big picture, the grand scale of things.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
today we are doing something completely different. We are turning the microscope inward.
Uh-huh.
We are going to look at a landscape that is arguably more complex, more dangerous, and, well, more fascinating than any battlefield or stock market.
Yeah.
We are looking at the human psyche.
And not just in a generic sort of self-help kind of way. We are looking at a very specific, very ancient, and frankly, surgically precise analysis of the human condition.
That's a good way to put it. Surgically precise.
We are talking about the tension, the literal friction between what we believe, what we say, and what we actually do.
And the gap between those things, that gap is where the disease lives, according to our sources.
Right. And honestly, looking at the source material we have today, this might be one of the most uncomfortable deep dives we've ever done.
Uncomfortable is the right word.
It forces you to ask questions about yourself that you probably avoid answering in the quiet of the night.
But before anyone tunes out thinking this is just a theology sermon, it's not. Or at least it's not just that. The sources we have today are, well, they're fascinating. We're looking at a detailed exegesis, a deep commentary on Surah al-Baqarah, specifically verses 8 through 16. But the lens here is psychological.
And sociological.
And sociological, exactly.
Exactly. The argument here isn't just be good and don't do bad. It's a mechanical breakdown of how humans deceive themselves. It's about how personal contradictions that split between your public face and your private reality actually lead to the collapse of entire societies. It's heavy stuff.
It is, and we've got some incredible source material to work with. We have a linguistic breakdown of the Arabic terms for the heart versus the mind, which totally flips the script on how we talk about our own inner workings.
It really does.
And we have a transcript of a lecture that, frankly, reads like a modern critique of capitalism, wage slavery, and social decay, all wrapped up in ancient terminology.
It creates this fascinating bridge between, ancient wisdom and modern psychology. It's like finding a blueprint for the human mind that's been buried in the sand for 1,400 years.
So the mission today is to decode this. We want to understand what the self really is, according to these texts. We want to understand the mechanical definition of a hypocrite. And, spoiler alert, it's not just someone who tells a lie.
Not even close.
And we want to explore how this all leads to something called facade, or corruption.
Which is the end state. That's where the personal becomes political, where the inner rot manifests as outer decay.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a hook that really caught me off guard when I was reading. We talk about the heart all the time.
Right.
In English, in pop culture, in songs, follow your heart, my heart is broken, he has a good heart.
Right. We culturally associate the heart with emotion, with romance, with feeling.
Softness, warmth,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But the source material poses a question right at the start that stops you cold. Is the heart just a pump?
It's a great question, because if you go to a cardiologist today, what is the heart? It is a muscle. It has 4 chambers, it has valves, it pumps blood to oxygenate the body. It's biomechanics.
And if yours fails, we can take it out and put in a plastic one.
Or a pig's heart, or a donor heart. It is, at its core, a mechanical pump.
So logically, if the ancient texts, specifically the Quran in this context, say there is a disease in their hearts and we are looking at it through a modern medical lens, we'd be talking about clogged arteries,
Cholesterol.
atrial fibrillation.
Exactly. But the source argues that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the terminology, a complete misreading of the blueprint.
Okay.
When these texts speak of the qalb, the Arabic word for heart, they aren't talking about cardiology, they're talking about psychology, they are talking about what we would call the mind.
So let's unpack this, because this distinction is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about today. If we don't get the anatomy right, we can't possibly get the diagnosis right.
We can't.
The source material makes a really rigorous linguistic distinction between 2 words that often get translated as heart in English. And those words are fuad and qalb.
And the difference between them is night and day. It's crucial. Let's start with feud. It's a very visceral word.
Okay, lay it on us. What is feud?
Feud comes from a root word that means to roast or to burn.
To roast, like meat over a fire.
Exactly. Think about the physics of that. The heat, the intensity, the searing. The fuad represents the seat of strong emotions. Pathos, deep feelings.
That makes so much sense. When you feel something intensely, like grief or rage or even massive excitement, you feel a physical heat in your chest, a burning sensation.
You feel heartburn, but it's emotional heartburn. That is the feud. It is the part of you that burns with passion or melts with sorrow. It's the raw emotional engine of the human being. It's reactive, it's volatile, it's the furnace room.
Okay, so feud is the furnace,
Hmm.
it's the energy source, the passion. Then what is the calb? Because that's the one that gets the disease.
This is where it gets really interesting. Kalb comes from a root that implies turning, revolving, or flipping over. It's dynamic, but in a structural way.
Turning.
Yes. The sources define the kalb as the center of intellect, or fikr.
Mhm.
It's the seat of reflection, of tadabbur, of understanding, of consciousness shar.
Wait, so in this specific anatomy, the heart, the calb, is actually the brain, or what we consider the function of the brain, the executive function.
Essentially, yes, the kalb is the command center. It is the decision-making faculty. The source explicitly mentions that if you were to transplant a physical heart from one person to another, even from a non-believer to a believer or vice versa, it wouldn't change their personality or their faith.
Because the calb described in the text isn't the flesh and blood pump in your chest.
Right. The kalb is the self. It's the manager. It's the entity that weighs options, that considers consequences, that looks at the data from the emotions and then makes a choice.
That's fascinating because it completely flips the head versus heart conflict we always talk about in Western culture.
He does.
Usually we say, my head says do the smart thing, but my heart says do the passionate thing. We view the heart as the irrational, emotional actor.
But this model suggests the kalb, the heart, is the rational actor. It is the intellect. And the disease comes from the relationship, the power dynamic between the kalb and the fuad.
Okay, let's dig into that relationship. What does a healthy version look like, according to the source?
The sources argue that a healthy human personality, what they would call a balanced personality, is one where the kalb, the intellect, effectively manages the fuda, the emotions.
I like the CEO analogy here. It feels like that's where this is going.
It works perfectly. Imagine the kalb is the CEO of a company. The feud, the emotions, the passions is the workforce or maybe the raw energy in the factory.
You need that energy.
You absolutely need the energy. You need the passion. Without the feud, you're just a robot. You have no drive, no motivation, no creativity. You're just a cold calculator.
But you can't let the boiler room run the boardroom.
Precisely. That is the entire point.
Yeah.
The CEO, the kalb, needs to direct that energy. The CEO needs to say, we are going to channel this passion into this productive project, or we need to cool down because this emotional reaction is a bad risk right now. The kalb is the governor on the engine.
So the disease mentioned in the text, in their hearts is a disease, is a breakdown of this chain of command. It's an insurrection in the soul.
Yes, it's a coup d'etat. It's when the emotions, the feud, override the intellect. Or perhaps even more dangerously, it's when the intellect starts working for the emotions.
Ooh, that's a scary thought. When the CEO starts cooking the books to please the angry mob of shareholders.
Exactly that. When your brain starts inventing clever justifications for your bad impulses. I know this is wrong, but here are 3 very intellectual-sounding reasons why I should do it anyway.
Rationalization.
That is a sick heart. That is a kalb that has lost its function. It's no longer the manager, it's the PR department for the ego. It's a psychological equilibrium thrown completely off-center.
And this brings us to the most dangerous character in this entire analysis. The person who has mastered this internal deception. The munafiq, the hypocrite.
This is the core of the discussion in these verses, and we need to strip away our modern, sort of watered-down understanding of the word hypocrite.
Yeah, this was my favorite part of the reading. I always thought hypocrite was just someone who contradicts themselves. You know, the politician who campaigns on family values but is caught having an affair.
Right.
Or the health guru who says don't eat sugar while secretly eating a donut in their car.
Those are hypocrisies, sure, they are symptoms, but the source material gives us the etymology of the word munafiq, and it is so much more specific, it's almost biological.
It involves a rodent.
It does. A desert rat, specifically the jerboa.
Okay, walk us through this.
Yeah.
How do we get from a rat burrowing in the desert to a sociological diagnosis of hypocrisy?
The word munafiq comes from the root connected to the word nafika. Now, in the desert, this specific field rat, the jerboa, digs a tunnel. But it's not just a hole in the ground. It's an engineering marvel of self-preservation.
Okay.
It has one obvious entry hole. This is where the rat goes in. Anyone watching can see it enter.
So it has a public address.
Yeah.
Known entrance.
Right. Here I am. I live in this hole. I'm part of this community of holes. But the rat D's a second hole, an emergency exit at the other end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
However, and this is the genius part, it doesn't break the surface. It leaves a very, very thin layer of earth over the top. Just a fragile crust.
So from the outside, it looks like solid ground. It's completely invisible.
Exactly. But if a predator, like a snake, slithers into the main entrance, or if the rat feels threatened in any way, what does it do?
It boats for the other end.
It runs to the blind end, smashes its head through that thin layer of dirt because it's soft and designed to be broken, and pops out where no one expects it. A perfect escape.
That is incredibly crafty.
It is survival, and that is the metaphor for the Munafiq. The source explains that a hypocrite enters a system like a community of believers or a social movement, a political party, even a corporate culture, through the front door.
The public entrance.
The public entrance. They say, I'm with you. They look like they're part of the structure. They wear the uniform. They speak the jargon. They go to the meetings.
But they have the nafika.
Always. They have the emergency exit. They have built themselves a secret escape route that no one else can see. They haven't fully committed. They are hedging their bets. They have a plan B tucked away.
It's like a prenup for your beliefs.
That's a fantastic way to put it. It's a conditional commitment. I am with you, as long as it benefits me. I believe in this cause, as long as it's winning.
Right. If the movement succeeds, they stay and claim the rewards. They say, look, I was here the whole time. I'm a veteran. I deserve a promotion.
But if things get tough, if there's sacrifice required, if the stock crashes or the enemy shows up at the gate,
they headbutt through that thin crust of earth and vanish. They run back to their own interests. They utilize the exit strategy.
So it's really about a lack of integrity. The word integrity means to be whole, to be one thing. But the Munafiq isn't integrated. They are split.
You are fragmented. You are maintaining two realities simultaneously. There's the public reality of your commitment, and then there's the private reality of your self-preservation and your escape plan.
And that split creates a massive psychological burden.
Right.
The source material emphasizes that these people think they are being clever. They think they're deceiving the system. In the text case, God and the community of believers. They think, look at us, playing both sides. We are so smart.
But the text is adamant. It says they deceive no one but themselves.
Right.
Why? I mean, on the surface, it looks like they are deceiving others. How is it self-deception?
Think about the mental energy required to live that way, to constantly monitor your lies, to constantly calculate the odds, to make sure your public persona doesn't slip and reveal your private intentions, to keep the front door and the back door separate in your mind.
It sounds exhausting.
It's more than exhausting. The source argues that when you live this double life, this state of outward compliance and inward rejection, you are actively dismantling your own personality. You are damaging yourself.
It's like their internal compass gets demagnetized.
Exactly. The source uses the word shar, which means consciousness or perception. They lose the shar. They lose the ability to see reality as it is. After telling so many lies to others, they start believing their own performance. They think they are navigating the desert brilliantly, but they've actually smashed their own GPS.
This leads us to a really counterintuitive point in the notes about lying. This actually tripped me up for a second. The source brings up a scenario where these hypocrites come to the Prophet Muhammad and say, we testify that you are the messenger of God.
Right. This is a crucial scene for understanding the whole concept.
Now, within the context of the Islamic faith, that is a factually true statement. He is the messenger. They are stating a fact.
Correct. If you put that statement through a fact checker, it would come back true.
But the text replies, in God's voice, God testifies that the hypocrites are liars. How can you be a liar if you are stating a fact? This seems like a paradox.
This is where the source redefines what a lie is. And I think this is something we desperately need to understand in our modern era of technical truths and PR spin and, alternative facts.
Okay.
The expert commentary explains that truth in this deep dive context isn't just about factual accuracy. Truth is the alignment of the tongue and the heart, the lisan and the qalb.
The alignment. So it's about internal consistency.
Yes. If I say the sky is blue, and the sky is indeed blue, but deep down in my conviction, in my qalb, I believe the sky is green, I am lying.
Even though the words were objectively right.
Even though the words matched external reality, the words did not match my internal reality, my conviction. The lie is the disconnect, the schism between the inner self and the outer persona.
That is an incredibly high bar for honesty.
It is the ultimate bar for integrity. The source says that when the hypocrites said, "You are the messenger," their hearts, their called, their intellect, their conviction did not believe it. They were saying it to fit in. They were saying it to get access through the front door of the community.
So despite the factual accuracy of the sentence, the act of speech was a lie.
A profound lie. Because it was an act of self-betrayal. They were violating their own internal truth.
It creates a situation where you can tell the truth and still be a liar. That's a heavy concept.
It is. And this creates a feedback loop, doesn't it? Which brings us to another verse in the source. There is a disease in their hearts, so God increased their disease.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. It sounds harsh. It sounds almost vindictive. Like if I'm already sick, why would you make me sicker?
It sounds harsh if you view it as a punishment from an angry deity sitting on a cloud throwing lightning bolts. But the source explains it very differently. It explains it as a natural law like gravity. It's cause and effect. It's the momentum of action.
Momentum.
Think about neuroplasticity. Or just basic habit formation. Every time you tell a lie, especially this kind of lie, where you betray your own conviction, what happens to your brain?
It gets easier to do it the second time.
Exactly. The first time you compromise your values, you feel that internal friction. Your feud burns with guilt. You feel bad. But the second time, a little less, the 10th time, you might not feel anything at all.
You numb out. The conscience gets calloused.
The sensor for truth dulls, the psychological split widens. The increase in disease isn't an external punishment being inflicted upon you. It is the natural mechanical progression of unchecked cognitive dissonance.
It's like ignoring a rattle in your car engine. You ignore it, you turn up the radio, you keep driving. The rattle gets louder and louder until the engine seizes. The mechanic didn't make the rattle louder, your neglect did.
Precisely. That's the perfect analogy. The source describes this end state as becoming deaf, dumb, and blind to reality, not physically, but psychologically. You can no longer hear the truth because you've spent so long listening to your own convenient lies. You can't see the path because you've convinced yourself you're not lost.
Okay, so we've got the internal anatomy of the hypocrite, the rat tunnel, the split personality, the self-deception, this feedback loop of disease. But the source material doesn't just stay in the individual's head. It scales this up to the level of society.
Right.
And this is where we get into these two massive Arabic terms that kept popping up in the lecture, facade and isla.
These are the two poles of societal health in this text. They are opposing forces.
Okay, so define them for us based on the source. Let's start with the positive one, isla.
Isla is usually translated as reform or peacemaking. But the source defines it more fundamentally, more physically, as keeping things in their right place. It's about maintaining balance and equilibrium in the natural and social order. It's about reducing entropy, you could say.
Okay, so it's about order and harmony and facade.
Facade is the opposite. It's usually translated as corruption or mischief. But again, the definition here is very specific and mechanical. It means the disruption of balance, putting things where they don't belong, creating unevenness and disequilibrium. It is the introduction of chaos into a system.
Here's the kicker, though. The source notes that when these hypocrites, these people with the split personalities, are confronted, when they are told, do not create corruption, facade in the land, what is their response?
They don't say, yeah, you caught us, we're the bad guys.
No.
They are indignant, they are offended, they sincerely reply, we are but reformers, we are muslihun.
We are the fixers, we are the developers, we are the job creators, we're making things better.
Right. And the source makes a very pointed observation here. It says these corruptors are often the most respectable members of society. They aren't the ones mugging people in dark alleys. They aren't the visible criminals.
They wear suits. They have offices.
They wear suits. They sit on boards. They are the industrialists, the political leaders, the people building the systems. And they genuinely believe, or at least they've convinced themselves through that process of self-deception, that they are improving society.
But the text says, beware, they are the corruptors, but they do not perceive it. They lack the shar.
Because they define improvement by their own metrics, by their own gain, or by surface-level material growth, while ignoring the fundamental laws of equity and balance. They think that because they are building a skyscraper, they are reforming the city. But if that skyscraper is built on a foundation of exploitation and injustice, the text calls the entire project facade.
And this is where the source material takes a hard and, for me, a very surprising turn into economics. I was expecting more theology, but the lecture transcript goes deep into what it calls economic facade.
It does.
It brings up two archetypes from the Quran to illustrate this, Shoaib and Qarun.
These are crucial archetypes to understand the sociological argument. Shoaib, who is often identified with the biblical Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is a prophet mentioned in the Quran who was sent to a trading community, a hub of commerce.
And his primary message wasn't just pray more or believe in one God.
No. His core repeated message was explicitly economic. Give full measure and weight.
And the source clarifies, this isn't just about making sure your scale isn't rigged when you sell a kilo of wheat.
No, it's much, much broader than that. It's a metaphor for giving full value in all transactions. Specifically, it's about giving full value for labor. It's about not diminishing the due of people.
The lecture provides a very specific and quite heartbreaking example of what we would call wage slavery today.
It does.
Let's walk through that example, because it really breaks down the mutual consent argument we hear all the time in modern economic theory.
Right. The speaker in the source sets up a scenario. Imagine a laborer, a daily wage earner. For him to survive, to feed his family, to pay for shelter, to simply exist, he needs a wage of, let's say, 3 rupees. That is the survival baseline. That is the value of his life and his labor for one day.
Okay, so 3 rupees is the fair price, the just wage, the full measure.
Correct. But the employer knows the laborer is desperate. The employer knows the market is flooded with other desperate laborers. The laborer is hungry. His children are hungry. So the employer offers 2 rupees.
He lowballs him, knowing he can't say no.
He lowballs him. And because the laborer is starving, he accepts. He has no choice. In his mind, the choice is between 2 rupees and death by starvation.
Now, the capitalist argument and the source selection transcript explicitly uses the term capitalist here, which is fascinating, is this was mutual consent. I didn't hold a gun to his head. We signed a contract. It's a free market. If he didn't want the 2 rupees, he could have walked away.
But he couldn't walk away. The freedom in that market was a complete illusion. His hunger was the gun to his head.
Exactly. And the source says this interaction is facade. This is corruption in the land. Why? Because you exploited the man's desperation to pay him less than the value of his life and labor. You created unevenness. You took advantage of a power imbalance to enrich yourself at his expense.
That is diminishing the things of people. It's theft, but it's sanitized by a contract. It's violence, but it's bloodless.
The source calls this a destructive peace. Now, there's no overt violence, no one got hit with a stick, no windows were smashed, but a profound crime still happened.
Exactly. The source mocks the idea of peace in this context. It says, sure, no blood was spilled on the street, but you sucked the blood out of him quietly. You drained his life force for your profit margin. That, the text argues, is facade.
And this leads to the second archetype, Qarun.
Qarun, or Korah, from the Old Testament, represents the beneficiary of that system, the hoarder, the 1%, the ultra-wealthy man who has perfected the art of paying 2 rupees for 3 rupees of value.
Yes. Qarun is the figure who possesses immense wealth. And when he is asked to share, or to recognize that his wealth is a trust from God that should be used for the community, he gives a very modern, very self-made billionaire answer.
He says, and I'm paraphrasing the verse, I was given this because of knowledge I possess.
I'm self-made. I'm a genius. I studied the market. I worked harder than you. I'm just smarter.
It's my strategy. It's my intellect. Therefore, it is mine alone. I earned it, and I have absolute ownership over it. The source attacks this mindset ferociously. It calls it the root of societal destruction.
Why? I mean, what's wrong with being proud of your success?
Because it is a delusion born of arrogance. It ignores the context. It ignores the society, the infrastructure, the workers you underpaid, the natural resources you extracted, and the divine laws of cause and effect that allowed that wealth to be generated in the first place. It argues that this claim of absolute ownership is a form of madness.
It's a denial of dependency.
A total denial. And the source points out the hypocrisy. These are the same people who, when confronted about the injustice of their system, claim to be reformers, Muslim, because they build factories or create jobs.
Look at all the good I'm doing.
But if the system is built on that 2 rupee wage slavery, and it's built on exploitation, the text classifies their entire enterprise as facade corruption on the earth. They are building a beautiful palace on a swamp, and they can't understand why it's sinking.
This brings us to a really profound concept in the outline, which I think explains why this behavior is so common, so pervasive, the 2 gods.
This is the sociological climax of the argument. The source describes a form of shirk, which usually means polytheism or idol worship, But here, it's defined as dualism in life.
It's not about bowing to a golden statue. It's about splitting your reality, your entire moral framework, in two.
Exactly. The source describes a society that has split God into two. There is the God of the heavens and the God of the earth.
Break that down. How does that look in practice? What does that mean for an average person?
The God of the heavens rules the private religious life. He rules the mosque, the temple, the church. People are very, very strict about this God. They will argue for hours about the correct placement of their hands during prayer. They fast meticulously. They perform the rituals perfectly.
Okay.
They are terrified of violating the God of the heavens by missing a prayer or eating the wrong food or saying a bad word.
So they are pious, very religious in that sphere.
In that box, yes. But then they step out of the mosque.
And they enter the marketplace,
Right.
or the parliament, or the boardroom.
And here they follow the God of the earth,
And who is the God of the earth?
ourselves, our desires, secular laws passed by a simple majority, or just the cold, hard logic of business is business. The source argues that when economic and political decisions are made based on greed or expediency,
Right.
ignoring the moral divine law of equity and justice, you are effectively serving a different God with a different set of rules.
So you have a society that is deeply religious on the weekends and brutally ruthless during the work week.
Yes, it's a dual citizenship of the soul. And the source uses a brilliant analogy here, the hot and cold house.
I loved this visual. It's so simple and clear.
Imagine a household run by two heads with opposite commands. One says, turn on the heater, it's winter, we must be warm. The other says, turn on the AC, I'm feeling hot.
The HVAC system explodes. You get chaos.
The system breaks, it creates facade. You cannot have a society run by two contradictory moral codes. You cannot say justice and mercy for all in the prayer hall and then practice exploitation and greed is the bottom line in the factory.
It creates a schizophrenic society.
That is the word the source material leans towards. It creates a collective mental illness, a society at war with itself. The result is facade. The result is collapse.
This really hits home when you look at how we compartmentalize our lives. That phrase we use all the time. It's not personal, it's business. That phrase is basically the definition of this two gods problem.
It is.
We are explicitly admitting that business operates under a different, often harsher moral code than our personal lives.
Exactly. And the source says this dualism is why societies fall. It's not because they stop praying, it's because they normalize facade. They normalize exploitation under the guise of that's just how the world works, while keeping their religion safely tucked away in a box that doesn't touch their wallet.
This leads to the reaction of these dualists when they are challenged. There's a section in the source about mockery and the fools.
This is a classic psychological defense mechanism.
Yeah.
When these successful hypocrites, the Karoons, the ones playing the game by the God of the earth rules, are told to believe as the people believe, meaning commit fully, integrate your life, live by one code of equity for all.
What do they say? How do they react?
They scoff. They say, shall we believe as the fools, Sufaha, believe?
They call the believers, the truly integrated people, fools.
Yes. Think about it from a purely materialist perspective. You have a person who sacrifices personal gain for the good of the community, someone who refuses to take a bribe because it's wrong, someone who pays the worker the 3 rupees instead of the 2 because it's fair, even if it cuts into their profit.
To the guy who's stacking cash and building his empire, that person looks like a sucker.
Exactly. To the desert rat hypocrite, that person is an idiot. You're leaving money on the table? You're soft. You're naive.
You don't know how the real world works.
That is the mantra of the corrupt. They see their own cunning, their ability to tunnel out the back, to exploit the system, to serve two gods as intelligence, and by extension, they must see integrity as stupidity.
But the source, of course, flips the script.
It does. The text states, very powerfully, beware, they are the fools, but they do not know.
Why are they the fools? From their perspective, they're winning. They have the money, the power, the status.
Because their cleverness is fatally short-sighted. They are hoarding wealth in a burning house. They are destroying the very social fabric that sustains them. Their pursuit of individual gain at the expense of the whole is actually the most stupid, self-destructive strategy imaginable in the long run.
And this connects to that line we touched on earlier where it says God mocks them. I asked about this. Does God literally sit there and mock people? It seems petty.
Right. And the expert interpretation in the source is very nuanced here. It says the mockery is the natural consequence. It uses the Arabic term yamahun, which means wandering blindly in a trackless desert.
So the mockery isn't laughter, it's the long leash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
God mocks them by allowing them to succeed in their wrong path. They cheat and they get richer. They exploit and their stock goes up. They break the rules and they get away with it. They think, see, I'm winning. The system works for me. There are no consequences.
But they are actually wandering deeper and deeper into the desert with no map and no compass.
They are walking toward a cliff, convinced it's a superhighway to success. The joke is on them because they are building an empire on a foundation that is actively crumbling beneath their feet. The further they go, the harder the fall will be. They are trading direction for confusion, but the confusion looks like success for a little while.
That brings us to the final and honestly the most vivid analogy in the source material, the story of the 1,000-rupee note. This really visualizes the tragedy of that success.
This is a great anecdote from the lecture transcript. It speaks to the ultimate futility of this two gods lifestyle, this hoarding mentality.
So tell us the story.
The speaker recalls a time in his country when high-denomination currency notes, 1,000-rupee notes, were demonetized. Basically, overnight, the government declared they were no longer legal tender.
We've seen this happen in various countries. It creates panic and chaos.
Massive panic. Now, the analogy is this. The smart hypocrites, the Karoons, spend their entire lives hoarding currency. But what is this currency? It's lies. It's social status built on exploitation. It's wealth gained through facade. They have sacks and sacks of this currency. They stack it to the ceiling.
They think they are the richest people in the room. They look at the honest man with his empty pockets and they laugh at him, calling him a fool.
Right. But at the end, whether you interpret that as the moment of death or the moment of societal collapse or the day of judgment, the currency changes. The real economy of the universe, the source argues, operates on a different standard. It operates on truth, integrity, and equity.
And they show up to that new economy with sacks of worthless paper.
They show up with monopoly money. They realize, in a moment of horrifying clarity, that they spent their entire lives working for a currency that has no value in the reality they are now facing. The source describes this as a bad business deal.
They purchased error at the price of guidance.
That's the verse. It's the language of the marketplace. They made a trade. They traded a map, a clear path guidance for the thrill of wandering blindly in the desert, thinking they were getting a good deal because the wandering felt like freedom and power. It's the ultimate bankruptcy.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize this. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the micro to the macro.
We have. It's been a journey from the inside of the mind to the structure of society.
We started with the anatomy of the kalb, the mind, and how its job is to manage the burning emotions of the fuad. We talked about the hypocrite not as a simple liar, but as a desert rat with a split personality, suffering from a deep, corrosive self-deception. We then moved to the redefinition of a lie as being a misalignment of heart and tongue, of conviction and action. And then we scaled that up to the societal level, the difference between Ayla, reform and balance, and facade, corruption and imbalance.
We saw how that corruption, that facade, manifests most clearly in the economic sphere, the Shoei versus Karoon dynamic, the wage slavery, the arrogance of the self-made man, and the root cause of it all, living with two gods, one for our rituals and one for the real world.
And finally, the tragic irony of the fool, the person who thinks they are smart for gaming the system, but who is actually just hoarding worthless paper while wandering deeper into a desert of their own making.
So what does this all mean for us, for you, the listener? Because we aren't just here to learn ancient Arabic etymology. There's a so what to all this.
I think the central takeaway, the common thread through all of it, is about integration. The source material is making a powerful argument that you cannot survive, not psychologically as an individual and not sociologically as a community, if you are fractured.
Alignment, integration, wholeness. Exactly. True belief isn't about how many rituals you perform or what you claim to believe on a survey. It's about alignment.
Is your inner self aligned with your outer actions?
Is your economic life aligned with your moral values? You can't be a believer in the mosque and a Karoon in the marketplace. That split is the disease. It's not a symptom of the disease. It is the disease itself.
And the scary part is, the source suggests that societies don't fall because they stop praying or lose their faith in a deity. They fall because they normalize that split. They fall because they call exploitation, reform, and injustice just business.
It raises a mirror to all of us. It asks us to look at the successful people in our own society who mock the naive, honest workers and ask, who is actually lost? Who is the real fool here?
That is the question to sit with.
And here is a final provocative thought for everyone to mull over. The source talks about that emergency exit, the nafika, the tunnel.
Right.
I think if we are being honest with ourselves, we all have one. We all have that one area of our life where we are hedging our bets, where we aren't fully committed to our own stated values.
That secret tunnel.
Right. It might be in our career, in a relationship, in our politics. My question to you, the listener, is this. Where is your tunnel? What is the thing you are pretending to agree with but secretly have an exit strategy for? Because according to this text, that little hidden tunnel isn't your safety net. It's the crack in your own foundation that eventually brings the whole house down.
Something to think about. Check your tunnels, everyone. Make sure your heart and your tongue are speaking the same language. Thanks for diving deep with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next one.